In the western region of the United States is a sleeping behemoth. This behemoth is the supervolcano that sits beneath Yellowstone National Park, a wildlife and woodland preserve. It periodically stirs, but it hasn't awakened from its sleep in about 70,000 years. But when it eventually awakens, it can shout and heave with incredible intensity. Yellowstone National Park. Where and what is it? The oldest, largest, and maybe most well-known national park in the United States is Yellowstone. It has the highest concentration of hydrothermal features in the entire world and is primarily located in northwest Wyoming, with a smaller portion in southern Montana and eastern Idaho. In 1872, the U.S. Congress created the park, making it the first national park in the nation. Later in 1976, Yellowstone was named a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, and in 1978, it was named a World Heritage Site. A location that has been seismically and volcanically active for millions of years is where Yellowstone is located. A hotspot, or location where a dome of magma or molten rock comes close to the surface, has been formed in the region due to the North American tectonic plates movement thinning the Earth's crust there. One of the most catastrophic volcanic eruptions in recorded history occurred about 2.1 million years ago, when a subterranean magma dome that had been accumulating in the Yellowstone region erupted. The volume of rock and ash that was blasted was about 600 cubic miles, which is roughly 6,000 times more volcanic material than was discharged during the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980. It was discovered in the early 21st century that this one eruption was actually two separate occurrences that had happened roughly 6,000 years apart. Around 1,300,000 and 640,000 years ago, there were two more significant eruptions. The latter, which was largely composed of lava flows, produced around 2/5 as much material as the former. Each of these eruptions resulted in the collapse of the magma dome when its contents were discharged, forming a massive caldera. The Yellowstone supervolcano fell in on itself, engulfing the surrounding terrain, including all of the trees, mountains, and other features. Calderas are the depressions caused by the process. In actuality, the Yellowstone supervolcano is also referred to as the Yellowstone caldera. A significant natural hazard would be produced in Yellowstone by a caldera-forming eruption. The third eruption created the current Yellowstone caldera, which is a roughly oval-shaped basin about 30 by 45 miles, and including the northern two-thirds of Yellowstone Lake. It's located in the west-central region of the national park. The Western Dome is the source of many of the park's most well-known hydrothermal phenomena. Two resurgent magma domes, one just north and the other just west of Yellowstone Lake, have been building in the caldera. Additionally, seismic activity in the Yellowstone region is very high. The park is located on top of a network of faults related to the area's volcanic history, which also explains why the area gets hundreds of minor earthquakes every year. The vast majority of these tremors have a magnitude of 2.0 or less and do not affect nearby residents. However, on rare occasions, a more intense tremor will occur in the vicinity and have an impact on the park. Several hydrothermal phenomena at Yellowstone, including its recognizable geyser, Old Faithful, were impacted by one such incident, a deadly earthquake that hit in southern Montana just outside the park's northwest corner in 1959. What causes the tension now? Large-scale flooding, rock slides, and mudslides occurred at Yellowstone National Park in June 2022 as a result of unusual heavy rainfall. Roads, sewage and water system, electricity lines, and other essential park infrastructures were severely harmed by historic flood levels. Visitors saw nature as its most erratic as the Yellowstone River peaked in a chocolate-brown torrent and wiped away everything in its path rather than marveling at giant elk and bison, bubbling thermal pools, and the dependable explosion of Old Faithful's geyser. The north entrance road between Mammoth Hot Springs, Wyoming, and Gardner, Montana, as well as three parts of the northeast entrance road between Lamar Valley and Cook City, or the Silvergate, Montana, were both completely devastated by the flood. For the first time since a string of catastrophic wildfires in 1988, the park was closed to entering traffic throughout the summer. What really happens there? A hot region of molten and semi-molten rock known as magma lies beneath the ground above the Yellowstone supervolcano. The ground swells as magma flows into a reservoir or chamber located 4 to 6 miles beneath the park. The ground collapses as the magma starts to cool and harden. The ground rose around 25 centimeters between 2004 and 2009, according to volcanologists who have been monitoring this activity since 1923. However, the land started to sink around 2010. Many scientists are speculating about the possibility of an impending Yellowstone eruption due to the period of gradual, continuous growth. Concerns have been raised regarding the potential intensity of the eruption if it occurs. It is speculative to determine the magnitude of an eruption based on the degree of recent underground activity. The volcano has risen at the quickest rate ever observed over the last 10 years. Between 1,000 and 3,000 earthquakes occur annually on average in Yellowstone. With a magnitude of 3 or less, the majority are essentially undetectable. Nevertheless, these tremors help scientists understand how quickly the magma chamber beneath the park is expanding. An increase in the amount of shaking and rattling heard throughout the park could be a sign that new magma has just been injected into the reservoir. Scientists don't believe the magma chamber rumblings represent a hazard anytime soon, despite the rise in temblors. Geologists find it challenging to foresee Yellowstone's next move since it hasn't been possible to fully examine everything that has occurred in the park. As a result, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what is happening. The 3 massive eruptions within the last 2.1 million years happened in intervals of roughly 600,000 and 800,000 years. The last major event is thought to have occurred some 640,000 years ago, and there's evidence of it all throughout the park and thousands of kilometers of the surrounding area. Within the Yellowstone caldera itself, which is 45 miles long and 30 miles wide, there is some evidence of the most recent eruptions. Known as the Lava Creek Tuff, this region still has a thick volcanic debris. Will they erupt again? Hot springs and geysers are the extent of Yellowstone's current geologic activity. Old Faithful, the most famous geyser in the park, ejects more than 14,000 liters or 3,700 gallons of boiling water more than 30 meters into the air every 91 minutes. A large explosion like the most recent one is improbable, according to United States Geological Survey officials. In actuality, lava flows or hydrothermal explosions are the events that the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory officials believe are most likely to occur in the near future. In contrast, the molten rock explosions, hydrothermal explosions release steam and hot water. Although lava flows constitute a kind of magmatic eruption, the explosions that generate calderas are more destructive. Lava flows seep out of the ground over the course of days, months, or even years as opposed to instantly destroying everything in their path. Moreover, they are not very common. About 70,000 years ago, the final lava flows in Yellowstone occurred. However, the distinct rock layers that can be seen throughout the park's paths today are still proof of previous eruptions. The rocks around the Upper Geyser Basin, close to Old Faithful, have some traces of fresher lava flows. While the North American continent has moved southwest over millions of years, the Yellowstone hotspot, like all volcanic hotspots, have stayed constant. The Yellowstone hotspot's earliest eruption took place in what is now the southeast corner of Oregon. The northeastern portion of Wyoming has seen the most recent eruptions. Will the eruption wipe us all out from Earth? There would be global repercussions if Yellowstone saw another big caldera-forming eruption. Ashes would fall and the climate would alter temporarily as a result of such a large eruption. Pyroclastic flows would damage areas of the neighboring states of Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming that are the closest to Yellowstone, while falling ash would affect other regions of the United States. As the ground surface collapses as a result of the extraction of partially molten rock from below, such eruptions typically produce calderas, wide volcanic depressions. It would be a catastrophic of epic proportions, but according to volcanologists, there are currently no signs that we are about to experience another eruption. It's not hard to see why people's fascination with the impending end of the world is still piqued by the Yellowstone supervolcano. They learned, among other things, that the volcano could bury areas like Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and Colorado under 3 feet of dangerous volcanic ash and engulf the Midwest. With that much ash, trees and other wildlife might be wiped off. Roofs could collapse, and numerous electrical machines could be damaged. There will undoubtedly be death and destruction if the next large eruption occurs during our lives. But not enough to end the world. Scientists are currently watching Yellowstone while it sleeps, listening for any hiccups or coughs in the effort to predict what may happen next. Yellowstone's hibernation does not guarantee that the energy that has been suppressed underneath the park for thousands of years would never resurface. What needs to be determined is when and with what amount of power.